You're a clone soldier, bred for the Republic. Imagine discovering one day that the scientist who created you, your very own personal god, has betrayed you. In their quest for expediency and to meet a client's demand, they chose to trade your DNA's longevity for accelerated growth. As a result, by the time you reach the age of 9, your body, your height, your muscles and joints resemble that of a person twice your age. While you reach adulthood in half the speed, you also reach the end of the road twice as fast as well. This was the harsh reality for every Django-fed clone emerging from the growth fats on Camino. Now for us, this idea is unthinkably evil. It's perhaps one of the worst things that the Republic, the Kaminoans, did to the clones. I mean, being engineered and bred for conflict with no say in the matter is something we intellectually can understand is wrong. But unless we've experienced combat ourselves, the fear and intense focus that one experiences, I think it's hard for us to emotionally connect with the clones on this matter. But the idea of being robbed of your youth, of your life expectancy, so that some cloners can meet a deadline, like you're some mass-produced product, that is something we can understand in a much more personal way. Because we all fear the limited time we have in life, the ever-creeping shadow of death and decay. To rob someone of their lifespan, of the good years that they have left, is a slap to our faces. It threatens our sense of mortality, and maybe if we say something about it, we can extend our own lives somehow. But our lives are completely different from the clones. I mean, most of us have options of living a full life. We have choices. I know a lot of people will comment that they don't for a variety of reasons. I understand that not everyone can live the privileged life of a spice runner, constantly on the run from the law and visiting many exotic planets. I'm not trying to dismiss other people's experiences or their suffering, but very people grew up in a situation like the clones did, in such an isolated system and culture where basically you only have one path in life, and that is to become a soldier to the Grand Army of the Republic. And in a best case scenario, your end game in that life is an honorable death on the battlefield. That's not something most of us have to deal with. I mean, for one, most of us are born into families, loving or not. Most of us have some semblance of parents. Or for those of us who don't, we have guardians appointed to us by the state or by some ancient religious cult who masquerades around like a quasi-government agency.
We must take them somewhere where the Sith will not sense their presence.
Split up, they should be.
But of course, without the proper infrastructure, investment, and resources and procedure, things like this happen. Yeah. So once we hit adulthood, and for some even earlier in their lives, we have branching paths we can take our lives in. We can start an education, start a career, or just a job is fine. Some want to start families, others want to explore the world, or their own belly button. Others want to be mermaids, which is anatomically not really possible, and you also put lifeguards in the nearby area in danger. And some, well, they want to do it all. It's those endless possibilities we have in life, the things that bring us happiness, joy, or just a sense of belonging, that makes us fear death. This idea of a shortened existence means that we might not experience everything that we set out to experience. This is the major difference between us and the clones. For them, the course is more or less set and scheduled from the moment they can walk, such as military life. Now, the thing we do share with the clones as human beings is a more primal fear of oblivion, of the unknown. It's natural to be scared about the finality of death and the potential pain and discomfort associated with it all. But that's something that's easy to understand. It's a feeling that you can train yourself to kind of store away in that section of your brain where you put unnecessary or irrational thoughts. I'm almost certain that most clones have been trained and conditioned to overcome this fear of death, especially when you consider how many, without hesitation, would give their lives for an objective or for their brothers during the war. But what is far more difficult to overcome is the thought of losing all the people you love in your life or the things you love in life. I wonder if the clones actually thought about this, or because of their extremely focused mission and structure, maybe they just didn't have time. In war, usually soldiers store away their thoughts about home and their loved ones for when it's safe for them to do so. Feelings and emotions can be a distraction on the battlefield, and that could get people hurt. So did the clones have these concepts and feelings? I mean, what happens when your home is actually a Star Destroyer and the only family you know are your squaddies? Did these guys even have time away from the front? We know, especially in the early years of the war, the clones were hardly ever rotated to the rear. Some were even trapped in outer rim garrisons. I think somewhere around the Battle of Umbara, when we watched the 501st get marched into that meat grinder of a battle and die in startling numbers, it started hitting me just how futile this entire ordeal was. And at the same time, I realized how well conditioned the clones clones were to handle it all. Only a few clones, the higher-ranking ones who actually had responsibility over other people's lives, like Rex and Fives, challenged the corrupt General Ponkrell.
Sir, if I may address your accusation, I followed your orders, even in the face of a plan that was, in my opinion, severely flawed. A plan that cost us men, not clones, men!
They didn't do this out of a selfish desire to preserve their own lives, but to protect the individuals they loved, their comrades. Now, I felt a lot of pity for these clones, but at the same time, I also saw them as less human in a messed up way, because most of these clones, the rank and file, did not break. They just followed orders like a good clone soldier should. It's kind of scary. And I think it's important to understand this when we take a look at the clone troopers and how they viewed this idea that they had a shortened lifespan. At first, I'm not even sure when they were told this. I imagine the Kaminoans told them at a very young age, in a very matter-of-fact way. I mean, they were a very clinical species, and they didn't seem to have that much empathy for the clones. The clones, despite looking like adults, had the brains of 9-year-olds. Yes, they acted more mature, but they've only had 9 years of experience. And I would argue that their social development is a lot less advanced than a normal child's, because their main focus, again, is not relationships with others, but on warfare. When we're young, we tend to just accept explanations of the world without too much questioning. When I was a kid, I always believed that chocolate milk comes from chocolate cows. It's only when I got older that I realized that chocolate milk comes from cows that are fed chocolate. And so maybe the clones just accepted their shortened lives because they were never taught to question anything, and because that's how it was, and because they didn't have any choice in the matter. And the Kaminoans didn't make a big deal about it, or gave them any reason to think that it was messed up. The Kaminoans just kept on feeding them large amounts of protein blocks and, bantha steaks. Because, yeah, increased growth means the clones ate a lot, much more than a normal human being. The only source material I've ever seen that discusses how the clones think about their shortened lifespan is the Republic Commando series, which is now Legends because Lucasfilm and Disney really don't like these books, because they highlight how messed up the Republic and the Jedi actually were to actually field an army like this. And to be honest, a lot of our channel's views about the clones, about the Jedi, come from author Karen Travis's work. Now, I read her series at a very young age, and I was initially pulled in by the action and military drama, but I stayed because of the tragedy these warriors faced, and the optimism and adherence to duty these clone commandos had, despite the fact that no one really cared for them. The Republic and the Jedi, well, most Jedi, were just using them. Those books made me understand what the clones were going through better than the Clone Wars TV show ever could. And the interesting thing is, when you read these books, when you take a look at someone like Clone Commando Darman, when he talks about the accelerated aging, he just kind of rushes over it. When Darman meets Jedi Etain Termukin for the first time, she senses that the individual inside the armor she's speaking to has the presence of a 10-year-old. And when she asks if he really is a 10-year-old, he just replies, "Yes, our growth is accelerated," which honestly is a typical response from a clone. They don't make a big deal out of this, especially in those earlier years when they're isolated on Kamino. Later on, when Darman and Etain have more time to talk about this, the Jedi brings this up again, and Dharma, instead of talking about how the whole situation makes him feel, he tries to reassure the Jedi that his 10 years of age doesn't mean that he's inexperienced. He actually talks about how strenuous his training is and how qualified he is about the job. Once again, we see that really intense focus on being a good soldier. This is really what the clones cared about, nothing else. What we're going to read for you right now is an excerpt from the first Republic Commando novel called Hard Contact. We've hired professional voice actors to portray these parts.
"I find this accelerated growth difficult to comprehend,"
Etain said. "It's a Kaminoan industrial secret."
"I mean that it's hard for me to reconcile what you appear to be and what you can do with someone who has less experience of the profane world than even a Padawan."
Sergeant Karada told us we perplexed him.
"You talk about him a lot."
"He trained my squad, and also 9ers and 5s. That might be why they put us together for this mission when our brothers were killed." Etain felt ashamed. There was no self-pity in him whatsoever.
"What will they do with you in 30 years when you're too old to fight?"
"I'll be dead long before then."
"That's rather fatalistic."
"I mean that we'll always age faster than you. We've been told decline for clones is mercifully swift. Slow soldiers get killed. I can't think of a better time to die when I'm no longer the best." You can almost hear the Kaminoan propaganda through Darman as he's speaking here, but yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. He talks about his accelerated growth with the same interest as he'd be talking about Blastech's new modular rifle platform. It's very nonchalant, as Attain notices there's no self-pity, and he's fatalistic about how it will all end. How come the clones are so stoic about this? Well, I don't think it's the Jango-fed DNA or any conditioning done by the Kaminoans. I think it's just a simple matter of expectations, and the clones had very low expectations. We tend to judge the clones and then pity them, framing their lives with our own world's expectations and viewpoints. But there is something to be said about having a life that is completely laid out for you, where you're told about the purpose of your creation and then given every tool possible to help you reach that potential. In this case, being the best soldier the galaxy has ever seen. We tend to think, especially in the West, that more choice equals better outcomes, but I really don't think that's the case, especially as I get older. For instance, if we take a look at the grocery store industry in the United States, the traditional regional grocery store, for me that would be like ShopRite, makes around $500 in sales per square foot. Traditional grocery stores in the US have tons of different products, along with all sorts of brands for each item. For a lot of immigrants or even people coming on vacation to the United States for the first time, the size and variety of goods in grocery stores can be a culture shock. I know my dad talked about this when he first immigrated from China in the 80s. I know Boris Yeltsin also felt this when he visited in the 80s. The American-style grocery store, it is the pinnacle achievement of our society. Now, if I were to ask you, which grocery store do you think is the most profitable and efficient in the United States? Well, it's Trader Joe's. They actually have sales of $2,100 per square foot, and Costco is not far behind them with $1,900 of sales per square foot. That's roughly 4 times the average for a traditional grocery store. You know what Costco and Trader Joe's have in common? What makes them stand out from the rest of the crowded field? Well, they don't give their customers that much choice at all. I remember going to Trader Joe's for the first time and thinking how little variety there was in the store. I actually remember having to go to a traditional supermarket afterwards to supplement whatever I bought from Trader Joe's. But if you take a look at Trader Joe's, if you've been inside one of these places, they always are packed. A lack of choice does not deter individuals from buying there. You might be thinking, well, Alan, Trader Joe's and Whole Foods have very expensive products. Maybe that's how they make so much money per square foot. But that's just not the case. Whole Food, which tends to target an even wealthier crowd and has even higher priced products, generates only $1,000 per square foot, about half of Trader Joe's and Costco's sales, and has a more traditional selection of products, aka too many products and brands. Costco is also famous for being very careful in what products it puts on its shelves, to the point where economists say that if your product is at a Costco warehouse, it's something people actually want and it's very competitively priced. Which is why there's nothing sexier to a woman than, flipping out that Costco card, especially if you have an executive black Costco card. I mean, that's a panty dropper where I'm from. Trader Joe's and Costco's business model focuses on this idea of choosing excellent items so that you start trusting that everything they have in their store fits a certain standard. This also means that you don't have to go back and forth between different brands when you go to the store. Everything you pick off the aisle should be pretty good and delicious. That's how they get you. Because seeing too many brands can be overwhelming. This is common in this culture of abundance we live in. It turns out 100 different types of olive oil brands do not make most Americans feel better, or more free, or more American. It makes us tired. It fills us with choice paralysis sometimes. It makes us feel uncertain when we're driving home if we picked up the right product. Now, I know this is a wild tangent to go on, and this might reveal my dark secret, my love for the psychology of retail in America. But the point is, a clone trooper's life is very similar to a journey to Costco. Everything for the clones is taken care of and is designed to meet a certain standard, and the clones are comforted by all of this. There aren't that many choices for them. You can be an infantryman, or if you really want to go crazy, maybe a bomb squad technician, or maybe a pilot. But no matter which direction you go to, you're still going to be choosing a Costco product. You're still going to be in the Grand Army of the Republic. You're still going to be enjoying $1.50 hot dogs with a free soda, and occasionally when you're feeling a little more fancy, you go with that chicken bake. And more importantly, these clones are not aware of the other options out there. They're not aware of the other grocery store that they can go to. Most clones don't get to see the outside world until the war started. And unfortunately, everywhere they go, there's destruction because that is the nature of their job. And so there really isn't a sense that they're missing out at all. FOMO, that's another thing that attributes to unhappiness for a lot of people. That's why social media can be a terrible thing to go on. It's a place where people place photos, videos. Oftentimes these are highlights of one's life, highly choreographed and edited pieces of content designed to show off. I'm guilty of this as well. I use my Instagram as almost like a photo album. I go back and look at old stories of the places I've been, and it fills me with a little bit of joy. But constantly immersing yourself in social media and seeing your friends post about their vacations, about their new cars and houses, babies, new free-range Ewok ranches can be disheartening. I want my own free-range Ewok ranch farm thing. And this is something that the clones also didn't have to worry about. The clones were isolated from the rest of the world. They knew nothing other than the training they were given and the camaraderie they shared with their brothers. And everyone had a shortened lifespan. It was a sign that you were part of this community. It was a shared experience. And when everyone has the same thing, there generally is less negative emotions and feelings about it. The clones were always comforted when they were surrounded by people similar to them, and that's because that's how they grew up. I'm sure they even developed a culture in where they were probably proud of their shortened life, in the same twisted way that the Imperial pilots just accepted the lack of shields on their TIE fighters as a sign that they were skilled and not a sign that the Empire didn't give a crap about their lives. The clones were conformists, most of them. I mean, you have individuals like Cutler Quain, who probably would have loved to extend his life because of the family he adopted, but most clones were indoctrinated. They didn't like change. They didn't want things to be different. I mean, look at how the Regs treated the Bad Batch simply because they were a bit mutated. This is unfortunately the reality for most clones. It's no wonder that in the Republic Commando series, the individual who actually tries to reverse the clone's advanced aging is a non-clone. Instead, it's one of the Mandalorian trainers, Cal Scarata. He actually spends the entire Clone Wars building up resources in order to find a cure. And he spends the rest of his time teaching the clones Mandalorian culture and how to be a man. Cal Scarata loved these clones so much that he would actually adopt many of them. It ultimately took someone outside of the clones' world to show them what exactly they were missing. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.